Okay, new Q&A.
Joining us now is Johnny Holmwood, the director of the Carl of Aspect.
Would you ever consider making a tutorial for editing in Resolve? Actually, we tried to make one recently, and I kind of figured that we could make a tutorial, but I'd rather make like a course on grading that's more in-depth, because now we tried to make like a 5-minute overview of DaVinci Resolve, and it was so boring and so, you know, not what we want to do. So instead, we want to make short tip videos. So basically not a whole crash course type of thing. Maybe we'll do that when there's a new version of Resolve out or something like that. But it's, you know, there's so many tutorials out there on how to edit. So we thought it's better to just focus on like tips of how you can be more effective, like how you can dial in your skin tones, or how you can, you know, be more effective with the editor, like how to work with metadata, so that sort of thing, instead of, you know, just making it like the other stuff that you can find anyways on YouTube if you would want to. So that's that, I guess. But then we want to make a more in-depth course on it instead. What is the best way to film dark-skinned people in low light? Light-sensitive camera and preferably light. You actually, when you light dark-skinned people, you can actually like slam a lot of light onto their skin, and it's just gonna look nicer when you get a lot of light going. And I really like the contrast that you can get from having, you know, light coming from just one source or something like that. But you need to have really high dynamic range for it to work. Otherwise you need to even it out, because you need to get the skin tones up so that it can compete with, you know, the highlights. Otherwise you're gonna overexpose and that looks crappy, at least in my opinion. So let's see what the chat has. Okay, sorry I'm new to this channel. How did you start on filmmaking? What made you start? I started making... Actually, maybe I started making advertising and then I moved away from advertising, yeah. But then I focused a lot on fiction film, so that's probably why I care a lot about the cinematic type of storytelling. But then I felt like that process was too boring for me. I didn't like how you write a script and then you pretty much just do it, you know, as it's written. I think that's a process that I find really uninspiring. I find the documentary process so much more fluid, so much more, you know, you react to real life, so you never know what's gonna happen. You always have to kind of be innovative with your creative thoughts. And that I recognize was kind of how I thrived. So the best me is when, you know, I'm reacting to things, trying to solve problems. Otherwise I can get a little bit sloppy, I can get probably a little bit more lazy, just because I'm uninterested and I'm uninspired. So the way I work the best is when I react to things, and I realized that, and then I, you know, moved towards documentary. But I studied some film, I studied some still photography. I was a still photographer before I became a cinematographer. And then that was my line of work for a while. I was a cinematographer, and then I transitioned a little bit to doing both cinematography and editing for TV. And then I went back to making my own films. Maybe there was probably like 3 or 4 years in between. Before that was like short films, fiction. And then I DOP'd feature film, fiction, and then, you know, I went on to doing documentaries, and that's where I'm at now. Short answer. Do you use DaVinci Resolve? Yes, love DaVinci Resolve. Have some issues that I would like to take up with Blackmagic, but that's for another day. Hi there, I'm binge watching your videos since some days. I really like your work. It's really sharp, cinematic, dope, edit and color grading. Thank you, Rice. So I think you already have answered this, but you are a self-made filmmaker, isn't it? I guess. I don't know the definition of self-made filmmaker. Anybody that's independent is probably self-made somehow. I mean, I'm self-funding my films in development. That's the way I like it, because I feel more free. I feel like I can do what I want when I do that. So in a way I try to... I've built a platform that makes it possible for me to make my films without, you know, chasing the money that most people have to do. And I do that right now mainly because I do a lot of advertising. Before that I did, for instance, TV, and then I took my money, took a couple of months off, went, did a film or shot a film, and then I usually edit it for a year or so, just because, you know, my process is like that. So it's just about, you know, building that platform to get it to work. And you also live on a farm. Yes, I do. This is an old stable, actually. So when I moved here, I tore everything out, kind of remade everything into a studio instead of a stable. So this was where the horses was standing back then, a couple of years ago. What are your next projects? Well, first project is coming out now in March. Beginning of March, first week of March. It's actually a documentary that I shot while I shot my last film, The Pearl of Africa. So at the same time I shot this web series that we're airing on this channel called The Confused African. It was shot you know, in between the stuff that I shot for the film. So it's about 50 minutes or an hour. In 8 episodes. So that's the first thing that's gonna come out. Then I'm working on a feature film which is in development, so that's gonna take a couple of years, I guess. But that's gonna be on this channel as like a behind-the-scenes documentary already, like in just a couple of months. I guess that's now. And then I make advertising, so all the time. And last question, yes, many questions. Where would you be next year at the same date? What date do we have? It's February, right? Yeah. 5th of February 2019. I would love to be shooting my next film. I am not sure if it would be in South Africa or if it would be in Canada, but that's probably where I would be. Probably South Africa. Somewhere. Not sure yet where. Is Adobe Premiere Pro CC hard to learn? I don't think so. I worked so much in the Adobe suite, like everything from Photoshop to InDesign to, you know, Lightroom and Premiere and After Effects and all that. So I can kind of switch in between them without much thought. I think the issue with learning like editing programs, any NLE, is really, you know, difficult because there's so many tools once you sit down and you try to learn it. And you can watch a tutorial and that's fine and all, maybe you get some understanding on what it is, but the only way to learn how to edit is by editing. So you should go and, you know, make a project, make a film, start to edit, and then, you know, after a couple of hours you start to get a hang of it, and then, you know, you advance. And it takes time though, but yeah, it is the only way, I feel. And it's easier if you watch a tutorial, but the only way to really get skilled and fast at editing is by editing. About your video editing rig, you edit on PC or Mac, hardware inside. I only edit on my MacBook Pro, maybe they've updated it, but it's the first, the one with the touch bar thing, the Retina. I don't know which version that is, but it's like the most pimped out, that one that you can get, and that's the only one I use. and I use mainly SSD drives via USB, and then I have a RAID. For the vlog stuff, which is a lot of material, I have a RAID, which is a Pegasus R3, I think. Yeah, Pegasus 2 R3, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe. And then what do I use? Yeah, so SSD for as an external scratch disk. I think that's the only way to really get the whole fast workflow within Resolve. So usually my process of working in Resolve is usually I kind of just throw the stuff into Resolve. I organize it within Resolve, and then if it's a fast turnaround, I'm just gonna start editing as it is, and then I'm gonna keyword, for instance, all the material that's in the rough cut material, and then I'm gonna transcode that into proxy files, so optimized media. I set the optimized media to ProRes proxy half resolution while I edit. So that's my process if it's a fast turnaround. If it's a more, you know, long-term type of thing, or if I have the time, for instance, to just set it, usually it's just one night that's needed or something. But then I usually transcode the whole project to optimized media, and that's gonna go onto the SSD drive, because then I can just unplug the SSD drive. I can go anywhere. I don't have to have like the big archive with me. I can still use the optimized media to edit. The downside of that is that if you do take it on the road and you don't have the other hard drive where the original footage is, sometimes you don't get the audio, depending on what type of format it is. But usually I want to have all my cache files, which differs. In editing I use half resolution ProRes proxy, and then when I get to grading I use ProRes HQ at full resolution, and then I just cache those files so the timeline will render. That's the way I think it works the most efficient. I think anybody that's used to Avid, for instance, which is a good, the best probably editing tool out there, it's better because you transcode things. You can get, you know, this feeling of Avid being way better than all other editing software if you use it. But that's also because everything is transcoded, and you're using, you know, material that's much easier to work with for your computer. In Premiere and in Final Cut or in Resolve also, you can just throw anything in there and it can be super high resolution, and the computer is gonna, you know, have to work a ton to get that decoded, because you can't throw H.264 material in, you can't throw Cinema DNG material in, or that sort of stuff, without the computer having to rework it in order to view it, and that's why it becomes heavy on the computer. So usually I want to transcode it, and I think anybody should do that if they want a fluid experience of editing. That's so much easier to work that way. And usually, of course, you need to wait for it to be done. But for instance, you might want to do an interview, so you can start working on that, and then during the night you do the rest, or whatever works. But I think that's an important thing to think about, because just throwing everything in there, it's never going to work when you use high resolution material. And most turnarounds that use high resolution material, they don't work in that way. So there's never an issue of, you know, computing stuff while you wait, because you have a, you know, long-term plan for your stuff. So that's usually how I work. I don't know if anything else with the editing. I just use my mouse and my keyboard. I'm happy with that. Anything else? Yeah, and then I use a, what is it called? Let me check. Okay, and then I use a Blackmagic Designs Ultra Studio Express to get the signal that comes in to the computer is via Thunderbolt. So then you put that out and you get SDI and you get the speakers in real time and all that through Resolve. So there are smaller, cheaper versions of the same thing, but I think it's good because you can get 10-bit on your monitor and you can get better audio or faster, lower latency type of audio. Yeah. Greetings from Venezuela. Oh, hello. How are you? How would you say this? What would you say is the first possible step for someone to take if they want to start working in filmmaking or TV industry? Which would you say is the possible career paths? Depending on what you want to do, if you want to edit or if you want to, I guess, yeah, if you want to edit first, you should probably go the reality TV route. Pretty boring thing to hear, but it's usually the best way to get a lot of work and to get your foot in, and then you can start doing other stuff. But I think that's one way. For a DOP, it's probably the best way to either assist someone, do the gaffer part of production, or work at a rental facility so you can get to know people, network, and then assist people. As a director, I mean, either you go as a first AD, like first assistant director, you can do that, but it's kind of hard because not anybody will get that opportunity. You have to be a certain type of organized person for first of all to do that. So I think just making your films is the most important thing. If you want to direct, you need to figure out your style and all that, because that's crucial. So I think those things, yeah, basic things that you need to do, you need to make in order to kind of get your foot in, and then start networking. It's important. Networking is everything. Let me see, I just gotta find the questions. Okay, here we go. Is amateur criticism relevant or even necessary? I'm not sure what that is. I mean, if it's your mom or if it's your friend, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's, in a way, you know, they do test screenings and all that for a lot of projects. I think that can be good, but usually I think I gain the most if I work with, for instance, an experienced editor that's also doing like script work, for instance, dramaturgy and that sort of thing. They are the best at kind of figuring out what's wrong with the story and coming up with solutions for it. So I think amateur feedback is usually, I mean, you can get an indication of stuff that isn't working, but you won't get as fast forward as you could otherwise. So I think that if you can involve people that have experience and that are, you know, brutally honest, there's no reason for, you know, not doing that, because it's just gonna make the project suffer if you don't do it. So I think not so much. How has the north of Sweden influenced your work? Could you see traces of it in for example, the Pearl of Africa? Regards from a Umeåbo. I think so. I think that mainly, I think a big part of it is, you know, the moody and mellow style that I probably have, and that I think most Swedes or Scandinavians have. I think that the patience, maybe, in terms of like not feeling like you have to kind of force everything. You don't have to, you know, throw in a cut here and there and like jump cuts things just to make it interesting. I think that's a pretty Scandinavian thing. I think the music choices is that. I think the graphics is that. I guess in a way, like composition probably. Now I'm just watching because I have some images here hanging on the wall. I'm just thinking about the composition probably. That also is partly, I guess, Swedish, but I think that it could be anywhere. But the cinematic style that I tend to go towards probably has a lot to do with the Scandinavian strict type of design and all that. Yeah, that's probably some of it. In Pearl of Africa, I guess. Yeah, definitely the music in the Pearl of Africa, because Rebecca Carriod made the tracks, like the songs, proper songs that are in there, and then I made like the mood music, so basically the atmospheric type of music. So definitely that is also very, you know, inspired by how it sounds here. But I think that I'm equally inspired by the US or the international scene, especially because I lived in the US for a while, so that kind of inspires you to kind of mash the two. And then I also have a lot of experience of traveling a lot in both in whole region of Africa, I guess, but I was a long time in the Arab region, and then I worked there for a while, made my last doc there, and I worked there even before that. Then my last film, I spent a lot of time in East Africa, so I guess those things influence you, but then in Sweden, I guess also the grade, I guess, comes from the moody Swedish. That's just me guessing all this, but yeah. If you make I guess this is a question Toby Dobson asked, if you made an independent documentary, what's the next step? How do you get people to see it? There's a couple of ways to do it. If you made a short, I think that the best way to get it out is, if you don't have an audience, the best way to get it out is via Vimeo staff picks. Hands down. There's no other platform that has, you know, the same type of impact, both for your career, if you want to go commercially, like either make a feature out of it, or if you want to work in advertising. Vimeo staff picks is the place to be. But you also have so much to gain from doing the festivals, if you pick the right festivals. The biggest thing, I think, if you're a new filmmaker going to festivals, is both the learning experience and the networking. I don't think it's so much about, you know, getting your film in and getting your big break because of that. That's a few percent, not even 1% probably, that does that. So that can be, you know, your break, but probably not. You probably have to work hard and do a next film and next film. So that first film that you get into a festival is more to create a network to get your next film in, and etc. So I think that's the other way, send it to festivals. But one big thing is to try to network with festivals and try to get people interested. But I think that the best way of releasing stuff is online, if you're interested in an audience. And that's why we're releasing the web series now, Confused African, online. I don't think we had, you know, a choice to go to TV with it, but we decided that, okay, the best way for us to build a channel, the best way for us to build for the next project and all that, is to release it online, then go to TV. So we think about it a little bit differently just because we have this platform. Other people will, of course, look at it in a different light, but I think the big thing that I kind of get so annoyed with within the industry has to do with the traditional way that they said when we made the Pearl of Africa, we made a web series first, then the big festival said that no, you can't do that, we can't broadcast it. Then it didn't matter once it came out. So it's a little bit up to you what you do, but you won't get into like a Sundance or something if you release your short somewhere else. But I have friends that have shown their film in the US, and this you shouldn't do. Shown their film in US on a film festival, then they lie to a different festival, like the big A festivals, and say that no, we didn't show it. Like they don't say they have shown it, but they aren't supposed to. Still get in, but they were so eager to show it at that festival that they couldn't wait. They should have, but they didn't. So be aware of that. Like you can't just get it out there. You need to wait. If you go the festival route, it can take a year or so before anybody picks it up. So that's what I'm really, you know, I don't have that patience anymore. I just want to get it out and then solve that afterwards. So we're releasing the web series, and then, you know, we're approaching festivals. And that worked for our last series, so it's probably gonna work now too. Okay. Do you have any advice, Tristan Wood asked, do you have any advice for eventually getting out of the DIY realm and working towards real productions? I guess, in a way, you know, I just had luck, basically. Or maybe not just luck, but I made the Pearl of Africa. And that's, you know, it's all me shooting, it's just me alone doing most of the stuff. So that's DIY, but with experience and with, you know, intent. And I knew how to sell the film. I had sold the film before, so I knew how to do it. So it's not exactly DIY, but it was made in that way, without funding or anything like that. And then that was made. And then I knew that my last film, what happened was that I released my last film, and then my career, you know, got boosted because of it. And then that happened again, of course, with the Pearl of Africa. So I released Pearl of Africa. I think I just released a web series at that point. Then I got offered from like Sweden's best advertising agency, which is probably like top 5 in the world. So I got an offer to make a film for them. And we put all our effort into that opportunity to make this, you know, the best we could. And it got, you know, way beyond their expectations once it was finished. And then since then we worked with them. They always recommend us to other people, and you know, that's how it works most of the time. So I'd say that the best way to get out of the DIY route and to get into proper production is definitely to make your first like passion project that takes off, or that is like your calling card, or something like that. And using, for instance, Vimeo staff picks, or because most agencies and that sort of thing gets inspired from that. Or, you know, making it in some other way online, just getting your work out there and getting it to take off. It doesn't have to be, you know, it gets 1 million views and you're the next Jake Paul type of thing. But you really need to think about, you know, how that passion project that you make, how do you get it in front of the right people? Vimeo staff picks is great if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, festivals are also great. If it's, you know, going out and doing a feature film is the thing you want to do. So it kind of depends on where you want to go, but putting all your effort into making one film that's really good and marketing the shit out of it is probably the best way. That's what we do anyway. When we release a film, we usually, you know, put so much effort into the PR and all that. So now with the web series, Andre is working all the time on getting it, like first the trailer, getting it onto blogs, getting it to influencers, getting it shared all over the place, writing articles, marketing those articles. Yeah, there's a lot of work with doing it, you know, your own type of way, but it's really efficient and you can do it by yourself if you're a small team that, you know, is trying to make it. You can definitely compete with the big Hollywood things, because what happened with the web series for the Pearl of Africa was that, of course, that was a big a big deciding factor of the success of that web series had to do with the media focusing on that topic at that time. So we got into a lot of interviews, and we got a blog on Huffington Post. CNN wrote about the project, top African show to ditch House of Cards for. There was like a big buzz around the whole project, which was the intent, but that also generated a huge buzz within the LGBTQ community all over the world. And that's where we needed support in order to get into mainstream. So first we did that, and then we got into mainstream, and then the feature film came out, and the feature film was a big thing in at least the LGBTQ community, but then outside of that it also had its place because it got sold to Netflix and all that. But I think that whole project is really a DIY project. So even if you have no funding, you can still do that. We didn't have more than... How much can we have gotten? Maybe we got like 20 or 30 grand for the first 2 years. And then like we got a little bit more, then we eventually maybe got like 100 or something to finish it. But we didn't get that until we got into a festival and was in the main competition at one of the world's biggest documentary film festivals. Before that, everything was done, just me shooting it and doing everything by myself pretty much. And then in the edit we brought an editor in to help out with the dramaturgy, and so you have to think about like how to get the most out of the material and everything. It's really hard, I think, to do it if you don't have a team, because producing it, I produced a lot of stuff before, but with this project I kind of turned it over to my brother Andre, and he's been producing. He started producing in the middle of the Pearl of Africa, and then he's producing everything since then. So we started producing it together, but then I left everything over to him, and now he's on his own. And I guess some people can go that route too, to find somebody to learn from, and any mentor or something like that that can teach them how to do it, and also build a network. And if it's somebody that's either an artist or you're on the other side, you're a producer wanting to work, find the opposite and try to team up, because you need each other. So that's a better way of doing the DIY route. Okay, so next one. What do you do on a cloudy day? I stay in here and I edit. How to choose a tripod? I hate tripods, but now it's a tripod. I usually choose the lightest tripods that are not the most expensive. Most of them are expensive still photography tripod. So this is a Sirui T2205X. That's a really good tripod, I think. But it's really simple. It is what it is. And then you need to have a head for that. This is a Manfrotto 501, I think, head. I mean, I don't want to carry the big video tripods. Who does? Nobody does. So that's how I think about it. I want to put it on my backpack and go up a mountain, and then the smaller and lighter ones work the best. Okay, this one. What would be your approach for marketing a non-English web series? For example, if you shoot something in Swedish, presumably you wouldn't necessarily use your Creative North channel. What would be your promotional approach? So this is pretty much what we're doing now, but it is in English. English web series. So first of all, like, define your target group. That's the most important part of it. Like, figure out who's your target group. Okay, so let's say it's like the Pearl of Africa. You could see, okay, so if we do it in Sweden, we apply it on Sweden because that's the easiest, I guess. If you think it's a market that's not, it speaks English, but it's not really. You know, if you look at it in press and all that, you will have a greater chance of getting press in Sweden if it's Swedish. So that's one advantage if you do a non-English speaking thing. Focus on the country where you have that language, of course, but then you need to define the target audience. So let's say for that one it's LGBTQ groups and transgender groups in Sweden. Okay, so then you'd start to see like a pattern within that. So maybe like, okay, pride festivals would be interested. Either trans or LGBT groups in general that are working towards human rights are the ones that you want to talk to. Try to get them involved in the project, either make them a partner or just, you know, talk to them so that you know that they are gonna share your project once it get out, because their members are gonna wanna watch it and they're gonna wanna share it to them if it's good, for instance. So find those membership groups that you can partner with. That's one key thing, because you need all the push that you can get, and that's not always online that you can get that push. Another thing that we always do is we either you try to get articles in press, for instance. So you would partner with a newspaper or something like that. If you can partner with them, and it could just be them, you know, putting your trailer on their website. But let's say you get one article, that's all you get. Then you need to use that article and market it on your platform. The way we work is usually, let's say with the Pearl of Africa, we always had Nöjesguiden in Sweden, for instance. So you take that article that you get, if you have that partner, you take that and you put it on your Facebook, you put it on your Twitter, you put it on your Instagram, wherever, and then you market it to, for instance, their audience. So you put, like ours was for a long time on Huffington Post. We got an article every week on Huffington Post. We took that, we put it on the Facebook, and then we marketed it to either the LGBT groups, but it could also be Huffington Post readers. And because it is an external source that isn't, you know, your page that you're marketing, you will get much more traction. That's a much more efficient way of doing it, and you don't have to pay a lot of money for it. Another thing that we're trying right now with the series is comparing the effect of using, for instance, a still image or a video on Instagram. And this can be a huge difference in like how it's received, because you can get a lot of views on a video on Instagram, but maybe that doesn't mean that anybody goes to your YouTube and watches the thing or subscribes to your channel. So maybe that's ineffective. If you use an image, maybe that's more effective because they actually have to go to the link that's sponsored in order to see something. And then maybe they're more likely. That's at least the idea we have right now and want to try out. But we also often try to get onto Reddit, for instance. And if you want to do that, you need to create an account and be active on Reddit, because otherwise you won't get the karma and you won't get to post in the bigger subreddits. So you need to think about that too. And I mean, press in general, the way to get it is to just search for stuff that is your topic, search for those articles, go into the articles, see who wrote it. They're usually either there's an email or there's a Twitter handle or something. You write them, you tell them to check out your project, that whole thing. And you probably need to do something like, I don't know, 200 or 300, something like that, to get 2 maybe. I don't know. it takes a lot of work and it's really slow, but we also do the same with influencers. We write to influencers. We try to first maybe just send the trailer to them and then they check that out. We don't ask for anything. We build a relationship and then eventually maybe the series comes out and then we try to get them to share it without asking them. So basically you try to talk to them, try to be friendly basically. And if you manage to do that, they're gonna share it if they like it, and you don't want them to share it if they don't like it anyway. So that's probably a good thing. What do we do more? I mean, the hard way to do it is like the Gary V way, which is basically sitting on the hashtags, for instance, on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, and trying to scan out people and then talk to them, answer their questions, become friends with them, and then share, something, and get them to watch it by being friendly as well. But that takes a lot more manpower, so that's maybe the second stage of everything. First, you try to get some news outlets to write about it and all that, and it doesn't have to be the news outlets that is your topic fits only there. It could also be somewhere else. You need to think about the angles of your story. You need to kind of build that into the narrative as well. So let's say we have for the Confused African, we had an edit before on the first episode, which we knew from the beginning that we would make it like it start off a little bit personal to how I immigrated to the US also, so try to connect the whole story to the personal part of it, so that people know why I'm making a film about Ken, who is the main protagonist. So it starts off with that, which makes it possible for us to connect it to immigration and, for instance, Donald Trump in the US, and that creates a news angle that we then can work in PR. So we try to work that in, and we try to do it in the first episode so that it is newsworthy, and then we work that episode once it comes out, and we try to get that angle going. But we also have other angles. You need to try to watch your material and see what type of news angles you have. Yeah, I guess that's enough to start. But sharing everywhere you can come up with for your project, of course. Let's see. Have you tried Sony or to get better autofocus on your vlog style videos? Actually, I wouldn't go for Sony because I don't like how they compress the image. I mean, the autofocus, I think it sucks on the GH5, but the GH5 is amazing outside of that. I think anybody that starts using a new camera, I haven't had the GH5 for more than a couple of weeks, or maybe like 2 months at least. Yeah, but the thing with that camera is that it has a learning curve in terms of how to use it to film yourself, because it doesn't have an autofocus system that works very well. I mean, this one, for instance, I figured out this. I've had this camera for a long time, the C300 Mark II. Was it like 2 days ago or something? I actually figured out how to autofocus the best way for filming yourself, because it's not easy to figure out how the freaking thing is gonna stay on you when you're filming other people all the time. So for the C300, the best way that I've figured out to not get it to kind of pop back and forth and do its crap that it always does, because it's a great system that everybody applauds for the autofocus, but it still sucked until this, and it still sucks a little bit because you should be able to change it a little bit. But when you set it to only refocus on faces, it actually works pretty well. Because what happens when you don't have that function is that when you do the vlogging style and you just turn your head like this, it's gonna go to the wall or something. It's gonna find like a poster thing to focus on. Maybe it does that still. I haven't tried the poster because that was the most annoying thing, that it always focuses on people on posters and shit. So it's not really, like if you're a professional, you shouldn't use the autofocus in the first place. I mean, maybe I'm too lazy to get a system that's wireless or something. But with the GH5, I'm definitely lazy because I could just use my phone and focus. I don't all the time. Instead, I just use the autofocus. I don't anymore, though. I try to avoid the autofocus because it's so unreliable. So instead, I try to manually use it, and that works much better. If I miss it, it's because I missed to lock the exposure or the autofocus, the focus point. That's usually how I do it now. I just lock the focus. And then it works perfectly, but you need to remember it if it's gonna work. I mean, Panasonic has a lot to do on that autofocus system, and the tracking is totally, useless. But despite that, it's an amazing camera that is exactly what I want, so I wouldn't go for Sony, no. I use Premiere and I really want to learn more about the basics, if you can help me. I don't use Premiere. I know how to use it, but I think DaVinci Resolve is superior, especially because of the grading. And I like Resolve because I can use one program for everything. I think that's the, it's really the biggest thing for me, is that that whole using it in a way that you can basically be in one program from start to finish of a project. You ingest it, you have a quick way of ingesting the project, you have an edit part that is really good, and then you have the grading, which is superior to any other NLE out there. There is nobody that comes even close. And then you have the audio section now, which is going to be really, really good, probably as good as the coloring section, but not there yet. It's still, very new. I think that, there's no reason for you using Premiere. I don't get why people use Premiere. So, yeah, keep using it. I started using it in the beginning. Used it for a long time, many years. Then I ditched it. Any ideas on independent stuff when you can't travel? I don't get that question. Maybe... No. Yeah. Okay, so do you ever see yourself not making documentaries? I think I do. I think if I do, I'm still gonna do it in the same style. I'm not gonna go away from that, I think. I think that the process of making docs is what I'm most fond of, so I would probably go for either amateur actors, or I would make it about something real. So, for instance, you'd make a documentary that is more directed, like hard. It's fiction direction, but it's still, a documentary story. That's how I see myself working with other stuff. But I always direct the advertising stuff. It's usually, not documentaries really. It's more of a mix of reality and fiction. So I usually do that already. Even though it's often a documentary style, you can't really direct it in that way in order to get the most out of the story. For instance, if you shoot a short documentary and you have like a day or 2 days to capture a whole narrative for a couple of minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes, it's really hard not to just go in and put your hand down and tell them what to do. It's possible, but you won't get as good material, I think. So I try to mix them. I try to blend the documentary type of directing with, just directing like a fiction story would be directed to get the shots that I want to tell the documentary story, basically. How do you know if an idea is good for your short, inspirational teaching vlog videos, basically not your big docu? Some of it we research in terms of what's popular, like what do people search for, what's working. So some content is that. Some stuff is, okay, I really think people should know about this. Other stuff, like the B-roll thing, was something that I just felt before Christmas. I just felt like, yeah, this is actually a fun topic because nobody's talking about it in this way. Most people are talking about it like you should just spray everything and, you know, capture everything and go into the edit. And I'm not that way. I used to work in Super 16mm, so that kind of demanded that you planned out everything. And now when I work a lot in advertising, it's the same. I was that type of person that went out and just shot everything. And my first film, The Pearl of Africa, Zero Silence, was shot in that way. But then when you work a lot more, and especially when you start to work in advertising with the bigger projects, you're never gonna get a sign-off on a project like that if you don't work with a plan that's solid. So you have to have storyboarded things, even when it's documentary, because otherwise people won't get your idea and you won't get it. Somebody else would get it. So it's not really that you have an option there. So that's how I basically kind of learned how to do that, and I thought that would be interesting. So that's how that came about. I mean, we try to mix like stuff that's inspirational. For instance, the mood films that we do, those are more fun maybe for us to make. But it's also a way to kind of broaden both the channel, broaden it, and also use those films to also show what we're capable of and try to get, you know, advertising execs to see it. And there's a mix of that going on. And then like the web series stuff, that's more, I guess, us wanting to tell a story. But it's hard to do that all the time, so... and what else? Yeah, we're starting a series about, like, now that we've done these live Q&As, we've started to kind of pick out the best content and try to make that into a mood video. And I think that's a really effective way to kind of recap stuff that's, you know, maybe something that's worth hearing. Everybody's not gonna go watch the whole full live Q&A, so maybe that's an easier way for people to get into it. It's probably also an easier way to get people to be interested in a live Q&A because they see what they're gonna get if they're part of it. So that's one other thing. And the vlogging style of videos, that's a really important part. I feel that the vlog is part of everything, that you have a sense of me and my life within everything that we do, because that's what we defined to be the future, basically, of filmmaking. I think that, you know, the way things are changing is that anybody that makes, you know, stuff that's personal has always won. Always. It's always the most personal films that, you know, touch people. Those are the unique things. So as long as you can make it personal, you're probably gonna be pretty unique because there's nobody else like you. So that's how we defined it. And the way that we try to work with the channel is from that, you know, essence of, okay, so this is a filmmaker, me, making films and, you know, living my life. So basically we try to get that sense of this whole channel being a documentary, like everything is fluid. Now this isn't, you know, a documentary, it's a live Q&A, but you should still get a feeling for, you know, what my life is by watching this and, you know, hanging out basically. So that's how we kind of envisioned the whole thing. But I've written, you know, a whole schedule for the whole year, basically. Maybe we deviate from it, but pretty much I've started to shoot pretty much a third of this year's videos, and I've written maybe 2/3 of this year's videos. So we're way ahead of time. I'm actually starting to shoot the winter videos for next winter already. And that's how we've worked since the beginning, because we shoot so much that we record some stuff that is meant to be, for instance, winter. And maybe we shoot that now, but then if it's a tutorial, it could also, you know, be broadcasted in the winter. So we actually have a schedule for the whole year, and yeah, it helps if you want to get on track. For us, we're trying to get up to 5 videos a week, and if we're gonna do that, you really need to know what you have to do. Otherwise, you're just gonna sit around and wonder what's happening. Let's see. Maybe you can share your LUT from your vlog videos. I love it so much. Blah, blah. I think, do we have? What did we do? No, we did. I did some for this Christmas. I don't think we've released them yet, but they're gonna come. Previously I made LUTs for Rec 709 and that sort of thing. Now I've made both power grades for Resolve and LUTs for the different cameras, so that I use at least. So there's going to be, you know, depending on what type of camera you have, you can use it. But then Rec 709 footage, or even if you have log footage, it's probably going to be similar if you use log. So you're still going to be able to use it if you don't have that type of cameras that we have. Yeah. Let me see. So, last question. I see you have a young family yet still produce great regular footage and earn a living from your craft. Is there a particular routine schedule you have to not neglect one without compromising family relationships or producing work that is not always 100% of what you like it to be? I mean, when I started the channel, I had to kind of, you know, be okay with things not being perfect. That's the first step of being productive on YouTube, I think. So in that sense, I think you get such a satisfaction of uploading to YouTube, I think. And just because you're being productive and just because you have an audience that you're communicating with straight away, that's so much more fun actually than going to a film festival. So I'd rather do that than go to a film festival any time of the day, even if the quality isn't the same. I'd rather do this channel than make feature films. But we do feature films because we can, first of all, but also because we want to make them. And there's a little bit of, like, there's different things going on. One is we want to tell the stories, of course. Two, we figure out that this channel is probably the best if we're active filmmakers and trying to make films and take you on that journey. So that makes it more interesting as a channel, and we have more to say because it's always changing and there's a special angle there that, I mean, nobody can do the same thing because they don't struggle with exactly the same thing on a day-to-day basis. So that's really, you know, what makes it easier for us to have that concept of working on those projects and then talking about them and trying to do that. And then the third part maybe is that we know that each film we make, or even each video on here, is always one step closer to getting a bigger client, bigger job and all that. This is part of our content marketing strategy, I'd say. So there's those things going on. And for that to work with a family and all that, I thought that, okay, so you get a kid and then, you know, you're locked up and you can't produce so much. it's actually the opposite for me. I'm so much more productive. I get up at like latest at 5 a.m. Sometimes I work for like 2 hours. I go up and I say bye-bye to my kid at like 7, and then 7:15 he leaves, and then I go back and I work. So you get those breaks in naturally, and then he comes back at, okay, so now we're actually having a new kid, so now he comes home at like 3, but otherwise he comes home now. So that's why the live stream is now. So he comes at 5 p.m., which is 5:01 right now. So then I schedule the live stream to be, you know, okay, done. And then I just set the export, and then I go up and I make dinner type of thing. So you have such a rigid plan in your day-to-day life, and that's just because it's the only way it's gonna work. And when you get up that early, I mean, sometimes I get up at 4, and then you get a lot of stuff done. And I've done that for so many years because I usually did that even before, in order to get stuff done before 9, when, you know, the rest of the world pretty much wakes up and you start to get emails and phone calls and shit that disturbs you. So I try to get all the editing done in the morning, whatever that is, like the most thought-intensive process. Try to do that as early as I can, because then nobody disturbs me. So I get up early to be able to do that before 9, and then at 9 I try to work until somebody disturbs me and get me out of my flow. That usually happens. Sometimes you can go a whole day without getting out of it, and then you're really productive. Sometimes you screw up your routine yourself and you get out of it. I usually work out just before lunch, and then I eat, and then I go back. I don't have, you know, I don't sit around much, especially when you have a kid. You don't sit around much. And then, I mean, I work until 5, and then I go up. So now I'm going up, and then I got my kid until he sleeps at 8, and then I go to sleep pretty much then, and then I get up. That's usually what my days look like. And most of the schedule, in order to stick to it, has to do with planning out far ahead. We got an editor last fall, I don't know, yeah. And he's been first editing the Confused African series, and then he's gone on to starting to edit the channel. So without him, it wouldn't be possible to pretty much do the channel. I mean, we could do one a week, but we didn't feel like we wanted to make one a week. We wanted to go up, and we want to make this our full-time thing, and then we want to do select advertising stuff, like maybe 3 a year or something like that, to really make just a big client type of work. So we have like a solid plan for that, and then for the films, we don't rush them. Because we have the channel and feel like we're productive doing the channel, we feel like that's a more interesting way of working. So the films, if they take 3 or 5 years, it doesn't really matter. We try to find stories that doesn't get affected by the time. Yeah, I guess that's how we get it to work. That's yeah, it's not easy, but I guess that you have those times and you just shut off. I don't do a lot of stuff, for instance, after hours, if it's not the personal stuff. So I can go on, work on this channel, answer questions, that sort of thing I can do after my work day. But I won't ever work on an advertising client thing after hours, like after 5. That's not gonna happen. I don't think it's that fun. So that is it for this week. I will see you guys next week, I guess. So let me know, keep commenting. I'm gonna try to get to whatever I don't get to now next week if I can. Bye bye.